we are what the future is for women.
Yeah.
And I look at having my daughters and...
This week, Demi Moore is on GMA, and she's telling us about her life like we've never heard it before.
He loved my children. It wasn't something he feared. He seemed to be comfortable with the enormity of the ex-husband. I mean, I felt like I was not coming with baggage. I had trunks.
She was the highest paid actress in the world, married to Hollywood royalty, and living what looked like a dream life. But behind the glowing magazine covers, red carpet smiles, and iconic film roles, Demi Moore was quietly falling apart. Her story isn't just about fame, it's about survival. Because while the world saw her as a fearless icon in Ghost, G.I. Jane, and Indecent Proposal, Demi was battling private nightmares most people wouldn't survive. A childhood scarred by trauma, a marriage destroyed by betrayal, a body pushed to its limits by addiction, and a reputation shattered by the very industry that once worshipped her. She went from breaking box office records to nearly dying alone on her bathroom floor, from loving mother to estranged parent, from rising star to fallen icon, and then somehow back again. This isn't just another celebrity sob story. This is the brutal, unfiltered truth about how Demi Moore lost everything and what it took to rebuild it all. Because behind every glamorous photo is a pain you can't retouch. And behind Demi Moore's silence is a story that will change the way you see her forever. Before Demi Moore became a Hollywood icon, her life began in chaos. Born on November 11, 1962 in Roswell, New Mexico, she didn't even get a chance to meet her biological father. He left before she was born. Her mother, Virginia, remarried a man named Danny Gines. But the new family life wasn't any better. Both parents struggled with alcoholism, and the household was a revolving door of violence, shouting, and sudden moves. By the time Demi was 14, she had already lived in over 30 different homes. There was no sense of safety, no stability, just constant uprooting. But the real scars came from darker places. At just 12 years old, Demi faced the unthinkable. Her mother attempted to end her own life right in front of her. Demi was the one who had to pry the pills out of her mother's mouth while her stepfather restrained her. That single moment, watching death come for her mother and fighting it back with trembling hands, forced her to grow up instantly. Then, at 15, things got even worse. In her memoir, Demi revealed that her mother allowed a much older man to assault her, allegedly for $500. That betrayal by the one person who was supposed to protect her left a deep emotional wound that would haunt her for decades. School offered no escape. She struggled with dyslexia and had to undergo multiple surgeries for a lazy eye condition. Eventually, Demi dropped out of high school at 16, completely on her own, scraping by with odd jobs like debt collecting and modeling just to survive. She wasn't chasing fame, she was running from the pain. And long before the world knew her name, she had already lived through more trauma than most people experience in a lifetime. But what no one could see then was that Demi wasn't just surviving. She was slowly, painfully learning how to fight back. Because underneath all the hurt was a fire that wouldn't go out. And soon, that fire would lead her to Hollywood. Demi Moore's path to stardom wasn't paved with privilege. It was carved out of pure grit. At 19, she landed her first major break on the soap opera General Hospital, playing the bold and determined Jackie Templeton. Out of over 1,000 hopeful actresses, Demi was chosen. She earned just $750 per episode, but it was the first real sign that her resilience might actually pay off. On screen, she played a character who chased stories and stood her ground. Off screen, she was still running from her past. Beneath the surface, the pain of her broken childhood and the chaos of her unstable upbringing hadn't disappeared. They had only been buried under ambition. As her fame grew, so did her inner battles. Demi partied hard, often vanishing for days into a haze of drugs and alcohol. She was known for her beauty and rising star power, but behind closed doors, she was spiraling. It was during the filming of St. Elmo's Fire in 1985 that things reached a tipping point. Director Joel Schumacher saw the warning signs and gave her an ultimatum: get clean or lose the role. That moment was a fork in the road. Demi chose to fight. The studio hired someone to keep an eye on her 24/7, making sure she stayed sober during filming. It was the first time someone outside her family believed she was worth saving. That kind of structure, that faith in her potential, gave Demi the push she needed. St. Elmo's Fire wasn't just a hit, it was the beginning of the Brat Pack era, with Demi standing shoulder to shoulder with the hottest young stars of the 80s. But even as her name started appearing in headlines and her face graced movie posters, the truth was more complicated. Demi was finally getting everything she dreamed of, but she was also learning that fame doesn't fix what's broken inside. And while the world celebrated her rise, Demi was still figuring out how to outrun the shadows that followed her from childhood. What came next would test her even more, because with fame came the kind of spotlight that exposes everything, including the cracks you thought you'd buried. By the time the 1990s arrived, Demi Moore wasn't just surviving, she was ascending. Her breakthrough role in Ghost catapulted her into a league of her own. The film, made on a modest budget, stunned everyone by becoming the highest-grossing movie of 1990, pulling in over $500 million worldwide. But it wasn't just the box office numbers that made history. It was the moment Demi Moore stopped being just another rising star and became a cultural phenomenon. Her portrayal of Molly Jensen, a grieving woman trying to reconnect with the ghost of her murdered lover, was raw, haunting, and unforgettable. The pottery wheel scene with Patrick Swayze, set to Unchained Melody, became one of the most iconic moments in cinema history. Her short, choppy haircut in the film sparked a global trend, with women all over the world copying her look. But behind the fame and fashion was a woman finally being seen, not just as beautiful, but as powerful. At home, her life mirrored that fairy tale. Married to Bruce Willis, one of Hollywood's leading action stars, they became the industry's golden couple. Together, they balanced two blockbuster careers while raising three daughters, Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah. In a surreal twist of fate, Demi's Ghost and Bruce's Die Hard 2 were the top two films in theaters at the same time, a feat never before achieved by a married Hollywood couple. Demi wasn't just a star, she was a force, reshaping what it meant to be a leading woman in Hollywood. She wasn't afraid to take center stage or challenge expectations, and when she appeared nude and pregnant on the 1991 cover of Vanity Fair, it wasn't just bold, it was revolutionary. That single image shattered long-held taboos around motherhood, beauty, and femininity. She wasn't hiding her body, she was owning it, and the world noticed. But as her star rose higher than ever, the pressure to maintain perfection quietly grew. Hollywood doesn't reward vulnerability, it exploits it. And Demi was about to learn that being the most powerful woman in the room can make you a target the moment you show a crack. At the peak of her career, Demi Moore wasn't just breaking barriers, she was shattering them. But with every bold move came brutal backlash. In 1993, she took on the provocative role of Diana Murphy in Indecent Proposal, a film that asked an uncomfortable question: would you let your spouse sleep with a stranger for $1 million? The movie exploded at the box office, earning over $266 million worldwide. But the controversy it stirred was relentless. Feminist critics accused the film of objectifying women, and Demi, once praised for her strength, suddenly found herself under attack for being too sexual, too ambitious, too much. But she didn't back down. Instead, she leaned into the challenge. In 1996, she starred in Striptease, playing a single mother who turns to exotic dancing to support her child. It was raw, unapologetic, and far removed from the polished Hollywood roles women were expected to play. For that role, she was paid a record-breaking $12.5 million, making her the highest-paid actress in history at that time. But rather than celebrate her achievement, the press ridiculed her. Tabloids labeled her desperate for attention. Late-night hosts turned her into a punchline. And when she followed it up with G.I. Jane in 1997, shaving her head and training like a Navy SEAL, the criticism only intensified. The message was loud and clear. Hollywood didn't know what to do with a woman who refused to be boxed in. If she embraced her sexuality, she was shamed. If she embraced her strength, she was mocked. Demi later reflected on this with painful clarity. Playing a stripper upset women, and playing a soldier upset men. The roles may have been fiction, but the judgment was very real. The backlash didn't just come from the industry, it crept into her personal life. The more she pushed against the boundaries of who women were allowed to be, the more isolated she became. Her boldness had made her a star. But now it was starting to cost her everything, and the cracks, long hidden behind glamour and grit, were beginning to show. When Demi Moore met Ashton Kutcher, it felt like the universe had handed her a second chance at love. She was 40, still healing from the public fallout of a high-profile divorce and the relentless criticism that followed her every move. Ashton was 25, charming, youthful, and seemingly unfazed by her past. Their connection was instant, electric. Just one day after meeting, they spoke for 8 hours straight, diving deep into philosophy, dreams, and the kind of soul-level conversations that make you believe in destiny. Within weeks, Ashton had met her daughters and even Bruce Willis, her ex-husband. The media didn't know what to make of it. A 15-year age gap, a Hollywood A-lister dating a sitcom heartthrob. It didn't fit the mold. But Demi didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt seen, adored, and full of hope. Ashton proposed just 2 months later in a midnight beach picnic, spelling out "Marry me" with rose petals. By their 4th month together, they'd moved in and launched a production company. It was fast, reckless, romantic, and it looked perfect. Their wedding in 2005 was an intimate ceremony at home, with just 100 guests and Demi's daughters reading heartfelt letters to their new stepfather. Even Bruce was moved to tears. Ashton took on the role of stepdad with a passion few expected, learning to French braid hair, helping with school events, encouraging their passions. Demi had managed to blend her past, present, and future into something beautiful. They bought a house in Idaho, threw family parties, and vacationed together, sometimes with Bruce and his wife, forming a famously modern blended family. For a while, it worked. For a while, it was magic. But beneath the happy photos and glowing headlines, the pressure was quietly mounting. Demi was trying to hold together a perfect image, even as the foundation beneath it started to crack. She thought she'd found forever, but forever, as she was about to learn, had an expiration date. From the outside, Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher looked like the ultimate Hollywood success story. A powerful couple who had bridged age, fame, and family to create something real. But behind closed doors, the cracks were widening. The illusion of perfection began to crumble when Demi suffered a devastating miscarriage just 6 months into her pregnancy. At 41, she had been glowing with hope, carrying a daughter they named Chaplain Ray. And then, in one cruel moment during a routine checkup, that hope vanished. The grief hit like a truck. Demi, who had fought so hard to hold her life together, began to unravel. She blamed herself, haunted by guilt over drinking and smoking early in the pregnancy. She spiraled into depression, relapsed into addiction, and began numbing herself with painkillers and alcohol. Her weight plummeted to 98 pounds, and even as she tried IVF and other fertility treatments, her body and spirit were breaking. Ashton, still in his 20s, couldn't fully grasp the depth of her despair. In her memoir, Demi wrote that while he tried to be supportive, he just couldn't meet her where she was emotionally. That gap between their ages, their pain, their coping, grew wider. In a desperate attempt to save their marriage, Demi agreed to things that shattered her self-worth. She allowed threesomes at Ashton's request, hoping to keep him happy, hoping it would keep him from straying. But it only deepened her shame. The woman who had once defied Hollywood, who'd stood bold and unapologetic in front of the world, now found herself lost, compromising, and quietly breaking. Even their spiritual journey, visits to the Kabbalah Center, a retreat to Israel, couldn't fix what had already fractured. The dream was slipping away. And with every silent dinner, every unspoken resentment, every press photo that masked the tension, Demi was fading. The woman who once commanded the screen with unshakable confidence was now a shadow of herself, clinging to a version of love that no longer existed. And she didn't know yet that the worst was still to come. The fairy tale officially shattered on September 24, 2011, Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher's 6th wedding anniversary. While the world expected loving tributes and red carpet smiles, Demi received something else. A Google alert on her phone linking Ashton to a 22-year-old woman named Sarah Leal. They had reportedly spent the night together at a San Diego hotel, the same night Ashton should have been celebrating his marriage. Demi's world stopped. When she confronted him, he confessed. But this wasn't the first betrayal, just the first she couldn't ignore. She later learned of another affair with a 21-year-old named Brittany Jones. The justification? According to Demi, Ashton blamed the threesomes they'd once shared, saying they blurred the lines of fidelity. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the coldness of it, the humiliation. The way he stood next to her days later at a charity event, pretending everything was fine as he spoke against human trafficking, while she barely held herself together, knowing the truth. The media tore into it. Tabloids exploded with headlines. Late-night comedians turned her heartbreak into punchlines. Demi wasn't just a woman betrayed, she was a public spectacle. And she couldn't escape it. Every photo, every whisper, every sideways glance reminded her she was no longer the adored wife. She was the older woman who got left behind. On November 17, 2011, Demi announced the end of their marriage, saying it was with great sadness and a heavy heart. But privately, she was drowning. The divorce dragged on for nearly 2 years, finalized in 2013, and every step of it chipped away at her self-esteem. Ashton moved on quickly, finding comfort, fame, and eventually marriage with Mila Kunis. But Demi was left in the wreckage. What had started as an unlikely romance had ended in devastation. And this time, there was no performance, no red carpet, no camera angle to hide behind, just pain. Raw, public, and unforgiving. She had lost her partner. But soon, she'd start losing herself. After the divorce, Demi Moore's carefully constructed world didn't just crack, it collapsed. Years of emotional strain, public humiliation, and unhealed childhood trauma collided all at once. On January 23, 2012, just 2 months after announcing her separation from Ashton Kutcher, Demi was rushed to the hospital after suffering a seizure during a party at her home. Witnesses said she was convulsing on the floor, semi-conscious, and struggling to breathe. The cause? A dangerous combination of synthetic cannabis, nitrous oxide, and starvation. Her weight had dropped to a frightening 102 pounds. She wasn't eating. She was popping Vicodin, up to a dozen pills a day, and mixing them with Red Bull and vodka. She was trying to numb something she couldn't even name anymore. Her once proud image in Hollywood had crumbled, and now her most cherished relationships were falling apart too. Her 3 daughters, Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah, were watching their mother fade into someone they didn't recognize. Tallulah, then just 25, said it felt like her mom had turned into a monster. Rumor admitted she was scared to be around her. Scout felt abandoned, convinced her mother no longer loved her. The woman who had once fought fiercely to be both a Hollywood powerhouse and a hands-on mom was now missing birthdays, ignoring phone calls, and isolating herself completely. By late 2012, Demi was completely estranged from all 3 of her daughters. She missed Rumor's debut on Dancing with the Stars. She missed milestones, holidays, and simple conversations. The silence between them stretched on for 3 painful years. Demi had gone from the center of a loving, blended family to a ghost, haunting the background of her own life. Even rehab, at a luxury facility in Utah costing $150,000 a month, couldn't immediately bring her back. Addiction doesn't just ruin the person, it infects everyone around them. And for Demi Moore, the wreckage wasn't just in her body or her career, it was in the eyes of her children who no longer knew how to reach her. And in the mirror, where she no longer recognized herself. The climb back from rock bottom didn't begin with a breakthrough, it began with a phone call. On November 12, 2015, after 3 years of silence, Demi Moore's youngest daughter, Tallulah, reached out. Fresh out of rehab herself, after battling substance abuse and an eating disorder, she made the first move toward reconnecting. It was a risk, filled with fear and uncertainty, but that single act of bravery cracked open the heavy door Demi had kept shut for so long. Within hours, Demi was on a flight to New York to see her daughter face to face. It was raw, emotional, and awkward, but it was real. And it was a start. Rebuilding trust with her daughters wasn't instant. It took months of therapy, brutal honesty, and deep emotional work. Demi didn't hide from her mistakes. On a 2019 episode of Red Table Talk, she sat beside Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah and listened as they laid bare their pain. Tallulah admitted to feeling abandoned, calling Demi's behavior monstrous. Scout confessed she believed her mother didn't love her. Rumor said she had panic attacks at the thought of even seeing her again. And Demi? She took it all in. Without excuse, she acknowledged how addiction had turned her into someone else. how shame and trauma had made her shut out the very people she loved most. That honesty, that willingness to own her pain, opened the door for healing. For 18 months, the family did therapy together, sometimes arguing, often crying, slowly learning to trust again. In 2017, a turning point came when they spent a week together at a retreat in Arizona. Through meditation, emotional exercises, and long, tear-filled conversations, something shifted. Walls began to fall. The resentment loosened. The love resurfaced. For Demi, it was a painful rebirth. Humbling, exhausting, and long overdue. She had lost years, but now she was showing up, and her daughters, once strangers, were slowly becoming her family again. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And after everything she'd been through, real was enough to start over. By the time Demi Moore turned 60, something extraordinary had happened. Not in the headlines, but in the quiet moments that once felt impossible. Her daughters, the same ones who had walked away from her at her lowest, were now not only back in her life, they were her greatest champions. In 2022, to celebrate her milestone birthday, Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah surprised her with matching tattoos that simply read Mother in Demi's own handwriting. It wasn't just ink, it was forgiveness, permanence, and love carved into their skin. That moment symbolized the full circle of their healing. A bond rebuilt not through fame or public appearances, but through hard conversations, time, and grace. They now spend holidays together, support each other's projects, and even collaborate creatively. Demi went from being shut out to being the heart of the family again. But her journey of healing didn't stop at motherhood. Her relationship with Bruce Willis, her ex-husband, and the father of her children, evolved into something few Hollywood stories can claim: true friendship. When Bruce was diagnosed with aphasia in 2022, Demi was one of the first to share the news, standing beside his new wife, Emma, with nothing but love and unity. In 2023, she joined the family to celebrate Bruce's 68th birthday, posting a joyful video of everyone singing around the table. It went viral, not because of celebrity power, but because it showed something real: the enduring strength of a chosen family. She even showed up to Bruce's 2009 wedding and he to hers in 2005, proving that sometimes love doesn't die. It just changes form. Through everything: divorce, addiction, estrangement, public collapse, Demi had come back not just whole, but wiser. No longer performing for applause or validation, she was finally living for herself. The woman once consumed by Hollywood's demands was now grounded in something more powerful: peace. And in a town built on reinvention, Demi Moore had done the impossible. She had reinvented herself not for the cameras, but for her soul. At 62, Demi Moore isn't chasing anything, she's choosing herself. In an industry obsessed with youth, relationships, and reinvention, Demi did something few women in her position ever dare. She stopped performing and started living. On her birthday in 2024, she told Vogue that the most important relationship in her life now is the one she has with herself. No longer looking to be completed by someone else, she coined her new lifestyle, solo partnering. A powerful declaration that she was whole on her own. The idea took off, especially among women who'd spent decades being told that happiness had to come with a ring or a partner. Now it came with purpose, peace, and self-respect. Demi wasn't hiding from love, but she wasn't searching for it either. In the past year, she went on just 3 dates, carefully chosen, meaningful, and on her terms. One of them was with an astrophysicist she met at a TED talk. They spent a night stargazing in the Mojave Desert. It wasn't romantic, she said, but it was unforgettable. That's the kind of love she seeks now. Not one that fills a void, but one that adds to a life already full. And in a surprising twist that only proves how far she's come, Demi has even formed a quiet friendship with Mila Kunis, Ashton Kutcher's wife. The two women started a book club together, meeting every 2 weeks to talk about life, literature, and the past without bitterness. For fans, it's almost surreal, but for Demi, it's just maturity, forgiveness, growth. She's no longer trying to prove herself to anyone, not to critics, not to Hollywood, not even to her past self. She's found her rhythm. She knows who she is. And while she hasn't closed the door on love, she's made it clear. If it comes, it will be someone who doesn't just accept her story, but celebrates how she survived it. And most importantly, they'll have to love her tiny dog Poff, who now boasts more Instagram followers than most aspiring actors. Because in Demi Moore's new chapter, even her dog is thriving. And that says everything. Demi Moore's story isn't about fame, fortune, or scandal. It's about survival. It's about a girl who was broken before she even had a chance to dream. A woman who climbed to the top of an industry that never truly embraced her, and a mother who lost herself but fought like hell to come back. She faced betrayals that would destroy most people, addictions that nearly killed her, and public shame that could have silenced her forever. But Demi didn't stay down. She rebuilt. Not just her career or her image, but her soul. She chose truth over appearances, healing over perfection, and self-worth over validation. In a world that constantly tries to define women by their relationships, their bodies, or their mistakes, Demi Moore rewrote the rules. She became her own partner, her own home, her own happy ending. And maybe that's what makes her story so powerful. Not that she was perfect, but that she was never afraid to be real. Because in the end, the most iconic role she ever played wasn't on screen. It was the woman she fought to become when no one was watching.